And just one more question. Does the President approve of the Justice Department's handling of the Jinwoo Kim leak investigation? We now know that the FBI investigators in this case not only seized James Rosen's phone records, they went through and read his emails, they tracked his comings and goings inside the State Department. Does the President approve of that kind of action by the Justice Department against a reporter?
I will refer you to what the President said in response to a question about another matter along these lines, and that is that he is a strong defender of the First Amendment and a firm believer in the need for the press to be able to conduct investigative reporting and facilitate a free flow of information. He is also, as a citizen and as Commander-in-Chief, insistent that we protect our secrets, that we protect classified information, and that leaks, that we take very seriously the leaks of classified information, because leaks can endanger the lives of men and women in uniform and other Americans serving overseas for our country.
This one too? That was the story we heard last week to justify the AP story. Now we hear the same explanation this week from White House Press Secretary Jay Carney. He was reacting there to a question from John Karl of ABC News after reports that the DOJ targeted our own James Rosen, telling a federal judge, in order to get a search warrant for all of James's records, that James was part of a criminal conspiracy. They had to say that because they wanted to go into court without telling us, without telling James, so they could have no opposing counsel and convince a judge to let them read his emails, including personal emails, track his movements, all in an effort to find a leaker who they thought they already had, and they had that leaker's records, but they wanted to see James's as well. Moments ago, the executive vice president for news here at the Fox News Channel, Michael Clementi, issued a statement. It reads as follows: "We are outraged to learn today that James Rosen was named a criminal co-conspirator for simply doing his job as a reporter. In fact, it is downright chilling. We will unequivocally defend his right to operate as a member of what, up until now, has always been a free press." Karl Rove is a former senior advisor and deputy chief of staff to President George W. Bush, also Fox News contributor. Karl, your reaction to this breaking news?
Deeply troubling. Look, every American has sympathy for the release of confidential secret information of the government. But I thought there was a fellow who spoke to this question last week under oath, in front of Congress, who put it right. He said the focus should be on those people who break their oath and put the American people at risk, not on reporters who gather this information. That should not be the focus of these investigations. That was Attorney General Holder speaking before a House committee in response to a question by Congressman Hank Johnson of Georgia. And look, we had to confront this question during the Bush administration. There were leaks of classified information, and in each and every instance, the focus was on the potential leak, not the reporter who received it. Can you imagine what would have happened if the New York Times, which was the recipient of a number of those confidential leaks, if the Bush administration had asked for the phone records, secretly asked for the phone records of up to 100 of the editors and reporters at the New York Times? Can you imagine what would happen if the Bush administration had gone into court and filed a subpoena for secret collection of information alleging that a reporter for the New York Times was part of a criminal conspiracy? We know exactly what would be happening today. Look, the focus ought to be on the people who do the leaking. The press is supposed to try and collect information, report it. That's their job under the First Amendment. And this is really, really chilling.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, everybody remembers the Valerie Plame incident, and Scooter Libby went to jail for that leak, and President Bush refused to pardon him.
He didn't. Not for that leak. The leak was made by Richard Armitage, the Undersecretary of State.
But let me just make my point. Let me just make my point.
Not to have violated the law. There was no violation. There was no
I got you. I don't want to get too bogged down in the case, Karl. I just wanted to refresh
shared.
people's memory, because he got questioned about it and he was accused of lying to the federal investigators who were investigating it. But the point is, the Bush administration members of it were accused of leaking to the New York Times, including our own now Fox News contributor Judy Miller, information about this woman's identity. You were involved in that as well. But Judy Miller went to jail because she refused to disclose her source. In covering that case, I never remember a sideshow about the Bush administration secretly subpoenaing her phone records and her emails and getting search warrants without giving notice to her counsel for her to object, so that they could just get to the bottom of the information whether she wanted them to or not.
Well, in fact, to go one step further, Megan, it was my experience, and I think it was the experience of anybody else who was asked in the Bush administration. We all signed affidavits that said, if you are a reporter who had a conversation with me about this, there is no presumption of confidentiality on my part. You can disclose any conversation, any communication, any email, any discussion between us about this issue without violating your journalistic ethics. Now, look, there's one other thing, though, that I want to go back to this, because this makes it even, the current effort, even more chilling. Last week, in that testimony, under oath, the Attorney General said, quote, with regard to potential prosecution of the press for the disclosure of material, that is something that I have never been involved in, heard of, or would think would be wise policy, end quote. Now, the reason this is troubling to me is we do know that he said that he recused himself from the AP, but he did not say that he recused himself from the James Rosen incident. And this subpoena asked for by the FBI under Department of Justice guidelines could not have been requested without the approval of the Attorney General, or if he does recuse himself, the Deputy Attorney General.
Right, so what did he know about that?
Stand
by, because we got a hard break coming up in 5 seconds, so I want to pick it up with you. And the DOJ just issued a statement. We'll pick it up there next. So the statement from the Department of Justice reads in part as follows. Leaks of classified information to the press can pose a serious risk of harm to our national security. It's important we pursue these matters using appropriate law enforcement tools. Such investigations and prosecutions, including in this particular case, followed all applicable laws, regulations, and longstanding DOJ policies intended to safeguard the First Amendment. The question is, Carl, last week we were told by Attorney General Eric Holder they had to run into court and get that AP information without notice to the other side, so they couldn't even have a lawyer present to try to narrow the request because it was a matter of national security. This was one of the worst leaks he'd ever seen. And lo and behold, this must be too, because once again, there was no notice to Fox News, no chance to represent ourselves, no chance to cooperate, nothing. They just took his records.
Well, there's a big difference between the AP and the James Rosen incident, though. In the AP instance, they were looking to identify the leaker by going to the people whom he leaked. This is one where they are clearly focused on James Rosen was a member of a criminal conspiracy. They wanted to prosecute not just the leaker, they wanted to prosecute the reporter who got the leak. And again, I repeat, last week, Holder said, quote, prosecution of the press for the disclosure of material is not something that I've ever been involved in, heard of, or would think would be wise policy. So did the FBI get this without his approval as required by Justice Department guidelines? Was he lying under oath to a congressional committee? Or was this decision made by one of his deputies because he recused himself? Or was he simply not in control of the Department of Justice? Because there's a difference between going to the AP and trying to identify the leaker by looking at their records. It's another thing entirely, as in this instance, to say we're going to prosecute the reporter for doing their job.
Well, they haven't prosecuted James. They did prosecute the leaker. It's an ongoing case. It was brought nearly three years ago. But the fact is that doesn't change the issue of them naming James as a criminal co-conspirator for doing his job.
That's exactly right. That, look, you can't prosecute somebody unless you suggest that you're going to prosecute them. And this is a very clear declaration by the FBI and the Department of Justice that they considered him a target of a criminal investigation and wanted to prosecute him for criminal conspiracy.
All there, black and white.
This is beyond the pale.
Gotta go. Karl Rove, thanks so much. Stay with me.